is going to be an eye-opening, mind-expanding program. The program today is on a very important subject called debt. Now, most of us have heard the experts say, get out of debt. And a friend of mine, Dave Ramsey, his whole foundation, his whole fundamentals are live debt-free. And I agree with him. If you're in the middle class or poor and you have no financial education, you should live debt-free. So what we're going to say is going to be counter to what my friend Dave Ramsey said. So pay attention. Open up your eyes, open up your ears, open up your mind. The other person is Susie Orman. And she's always talking about cutting up your credit cards. Well, that's a good idea if you can't control your spending habits. But I don't know how anybody can survive without a credit card today. You can't rent a car, can't check into a hotel, can't go out to dinner, you got to carry all this cash around. So we have three pillars of the financial education community. We have Susie Orman, who is extremely popular. And then we have Dave Ramsey, who is extremely popular. And then we have Tony Robbins, who's extremely popular, and he's talking about investing in ETFs and living debt-free. But Rich Dad doesn't subscribe to all of those things. Now, they're all valid points of view, depending upon your commitment to your personal financial education. If all you want to do is go to school and get a job, cut up your credit cards, and live debt-free and buy ETFs, that's the game. But today, you're going to hear about how debt makes the rich get richer. In the Rich Dad world, we use debt to get rich. We love debt. But this is the payoff. You have to invest in your financial education. Now, if you're not willing to do that, you're going to be a complete idiot and just go and buy a piece of real estate and not even know anything about real estate and use debt, then that's a suicide mission, and I take no responsibility for that. We are a financial education company, and that's what the Rich Dad radio program is about. It's financial education. So for all of you people out there who love Dave Ramsey and Susie Orman and Tony Robbins and don't want to invest in your financial education, this is not your program. But for those who want to find out why a guy like Donald Trump says, I am the king of debt, I love debt, but debt is dangerous. That's what Trump says. Other thing that Trump says is, I don't pay taxes because I'm smart. So for those of you who love paying taxes and love cutting up your credit cards, this is not your program. But for those of you who want to find out about the other side of the coin, how debt makes people like myself and Kim extremely rich, this is your program. But once again, you must be willing to invest in your financial education. So our guest today for the first part of this program is our partner, Ken McElroy, and we use a lot of debt. 2008, when the markets crashed, Ken started borrowing his ass off hundreds of millions of dollars in debt. And our other guest is Kim, my sweetheart wife, because years ago, when I first met her 30 years ago, she started investing in real estate. And what happened was she took to real estate like a duck to water. Soon we're financially free because in 10 years, she went from knowing nothing about real estate to being a real estate mogul, producing cash flow using debt. But this is what happened. One day I couldn't teach Kim anymore. She had her goal. Years ago, she had a goal. She was going to buy 2 properties a year using debt. And the goal was to have 20 properties in 10 years. Higher math, it's not. Just have 20 properties, throwing cash flow, and she'd be financially free. That's all she wanted. Unfortunately, she caught on so quickly. She had 20 properties in 18 months. She loves real estate. And so what happened was I said to her, Kim, I can't help you any longer. I've gone as far as I can go. And so you went to talk to Kenny. And now we have thousands of properties of real estate. We're deeply in debt, and we're making a lot of money. Is that correct?
That's correct. And
so what do you say when Dave Ramsey says live debt free?
Well, 2 things. What there's two kinds of investors. There's active investors and there's passive investors. Okay, and the active investor is the one that takes the time, gets their financial education, gets their investment education, and gets some experience. And that's what the Rich Dad Company is all about. It's about we want to work with active investors. The passive investors, like you're talking about, Robert, ETFs, mutual funds, 401ks, they don't want to put in the time and effort, and the result is going to be, very small.
Average.
Very average, maybe below average. So there's that. And then, we're talking to the active investors. That's who our audience is.
So quick question. Do you have credit cards?
I do have credit cards.
What if I told you to cut them up?
I love my credit cards.
Do you think credit cards are the problem?
No, credit cards are definitely not the problem. It's the person holding the credit card who has no education, financial education, that's the problem. It's the person that wants to use a credit card we use it as a tool. Some people use it as an ATM.
And do you love debt?
I do love debt. And we talk about there's two kinds of debt. There's good debt and there's bad debt. So most people think of debt. They think it's a 4-letter word and it's evil. And that's what Dave Ramsey and those other teachers talk about. It's like because people can't control their spending, they need to get out of bad debt. And bad debt is just debt that makes you poor. It's debt you have to pay for. It's your credit cards. It's your house, your cars, all of that stuff that takes money out of your pocket. But then there's good debt, and that's the debt we're talking about today. And with Kenny is good debt, and it's debt that we take on to make us richer, such as apartments, such as rental properties.
So, Kenny, what goes on inside of you? Because first of all, tell us a little bit about your background and how did you become an expert in debt.
And Kenny is our Rich Dad advisor on real estate. He's the founder of MC Companies. Website is mccompanies.com. And he's also the author of The ABCs of Real Estate Investing, The ABCs of Property Management, and The Advanced Guide to Real Estate Investing. And he's been our investment partner for
15 years.
15 years?
Yeah.
We've made millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars tax-free together using debt.
Yeah, we still will too.
Yep. So what do you say? What happens inside of you when you hear, Dave Ramsey is a friend of mine and all, he's a good guy. He speaks to a different audience than we speak to. So what do you hear when he says live debt-free?
I understand where he's coming from because really who he's talking to are people that turn their money over to somebody else. And that's really who he's talking to. He's talking about somebody that
they're financially unsophisticated.
They are, and they're basically turning over their financial future to somebody else,
like a mutual fund or
a pension, or and there's nothing wrong with those things. They just don't understand where they're invested. So I think.
So it's a better idea for them.
It's
right?
it's not a bad idea for the person who doesn't understand money
and who doesn't want to put in the time and effort to do so.
Right, because
they don't listen to the Rich Dad Radio Show anyway.
Right, and then so paying down your house, I get that. Like if for some reason they lose their job, they still have a place to live, and I think that's probably his angle. It's an incredibly simplistic. Basic, very, very basic point of view.
But it's also something that as a kid, I mean, most of us are brought up to get out of debt, right? We're all taught that.
Well,
it's like this mantra.
But times were different then. I actually remember when I was in the kitchen at our house where my dad and mom they made the last payment on their house. I remember this, and they were so excited. But the dollar meant something then, right? It was tied to gold, and
it actually made money.
It made sense, but now it's free floating after the 70s.
What I think is funny about I hear Trump pounding the fake news. What the average American doesn't know is that we have fake money today, because the dollar is no longer backed by gold; it's just printed.
100% true.
So we have fake money, and you're trying to get out of fake debt.
I know. I think of that Monopoly game, where that card if the bank runs out of money, they can just print more money.
Yeah.
I mean, it says that right in the rules of Monopoly.
Life.
It's actually true.
So let me ask you this: we talk about using debt to get rich, okay? And can anybody use debt to get rich, and who should and who shouldn't?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. I think when, Robert has a great example where, he bought his first property in Maui with a credit card.
Credit card, right.
And
100% debt.
Yeah. So, it can be done with a credit card. I know people that have started businesses with credit cards because they didn't have any kind of credit. So that is a form of debt. it's not necessarily it's higher interest, right?
Yeah, right.
It's not necessarily because it all boils down to the cost of money. But to answer your question, anybody can do this.
Wouldn't you recommend they get some education prior to doing this?
Yeah, if they just understood, what a bank exists for. The bank basically exists for people to put their money in it, and then the bank lends it to other more sophisticated people. That's all it is.
Yeah.
The banks don't want savers' money.
No, they don't. In fact, now they're penalizing people to have deposits. Right? They're charging them. And back in the day, they used to pay them interest. So you can see there's way more money in the banks than banks want, and you can see that when banks start to charge for bank account.
So once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. We're talking about the power of debt, and we're talking about Susie Orman says you should cut up your credit cards, and if you can't control that, cut up your credit cards. And Dave Ramsey always talks about living debt-free and all this. And if you're not willing to invest in your financial education, you like being middle class, then living debt-free is a wise thing. But what people don't realize is that debt makes the rich richer. And the debt have gone to school. They're sophisticated enough to use the power of debt. Again, Donald Trump says, I'm the king of debt. And when Hillary Clinton accused him of not paying taxes, he says, because I'm smart. But most people don't realize that people that use debt, invest in real estate, don't pay taxes. So, Kenny, how did you gain your education enough to understand debt and the power of it, should I say?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a business degree out of university, and I understood debt. I actually took multiple finance classes, but I actually didn't completely understand it until I actually got out into the real world and started working. And I started as a property manager, and that was a great opportunity for me because I was managing people's assets, and I was actually in charge of paying their mortgages, collecting the rents and paying their mortgages. And that's actually what I first started to understand, the different interest rates, how leveraged they are, which was how much debt they would have against their property, how much equity they had, and whether they could pay their bills or not. And usually it all revolved around debt.
Yeah. Debt is the most powerful force in the universe today because historically, after 1971, money became fake money because Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. They can print as much as they like, and what they print is debt. It's called a U.S. bond, a treasury. A bond is a form of debt. So when we come back, we're going to find out more about how you can build debt. This is a friend of ours too, but Dave Ramsey says live debt-free, and we don't do that. And then our special guest today is Ken McElroy. He's our partner, founder of MC Companies, author of 3 books on real estate. And we love debt because we're like Donald Trump. We love debt, and we don't pay taxes. But if you have debt...
Legally.
Legally.
We legally do not pay taxes.
You can't say these things if it was not legally. So anyway, Trump, as he said to Hillary Clinton during one of the debates, she says, well, you don't pay tax. And Trump says, because I'm smart. And what we're talking about is the difference in financial information or education. And where this comes from is Rich Dad doesn't recommend any investments. If you don't want to invest in your financial education, then buy stocks, bonds, mutual funds, munis, ETFs, really passive investments. But the rich, the ultra-rich, use debt, if you understand that. So a big part of financial education comes from the game of Monopoly. Kim started with 4 greenhouses. Then she transitioned to giant red hotels using debt. And the average person can't go to the big hotel because they don't know how to use debt. And Kim and I always laugh. The game of Monopoly is probably the most truthful game in the world when it comes to the financial crisis we're in. Kenny, what do they say when the bank runs out of money in Monopoly?
Yeah, well, as you know, each of the cards has debt on it. It shows the mortgage, right? On every single card you own. But basically what it says is if the bank runs out of money, the bank can print money.
And that's what's going on because Trump talks about fake news. The reality is we have fake money because the banks are printing it. If you understand that, you'll understand why debt and taxes go hand in hand. Because today, after 1971, when Nixon took us off the gold standard, money became debt. It's called a U.S. bond, a treasury, and all those things, or muni bonds and all that. So the real fact of the matter is debt makes the rich richer, but you have to have financial education. Any comments, Kip?
Well, yes, and I think when you talk about the average person can't do what we do, I think the average person does not make the distinction between good debt and bad debt. Most people think debt is all bad, and there is bad debt, and bad debt is your credit cards, your house, your
student loans,
anything that you have to pay for out of your pocket. Whereby good debt, and this was the mindset shift that happened for me, is we had our personal residence and we were paying our mortgage out of our own pocket. And then I bought my first property, and I was going to take on $40,000 of debt. And it was scary. It was like, oh, no, it's another mortgage. Oh, no. But then you start looking at the numbers and you realize you're not paying for that debt. Your tenant is going to pay for that debt. And that's the mindset. That's the mindset shift that happened for me, is knowing that I'm not paying for good debt. My tenants pay for the good debt. And that makes me richer and richer.
Right. Another thing, too, is when people say, when I was a lot younger, they said, "Well, you can buy a piece of property, but don't worry if you're losing money. You know, you're
going negative
rent,
every month.
Your rent is not covering your expenses. So don't worry. Don't worry about it." And I kept asking the guy, I said, "What do you mean not worry about it? I'm losing $100 a month." He says, "Well, how many of those properties can I afford to lose $100 a month on?" And the guy says, "Well, I mean, how much extra do you have?" I said, "About $100. Well, you can afford one property." So they call it negative cash flow, negative gearing in Australia. They actually sell this stuff. I mean, real estate brokers actually tell really stupid real estate investors that it's okay to lose money because you get a tax break on it.
Tax break. But that's the big point about good debt. Good debt, there's
Makes
another factor to good debt. Good debt, if you manage the property well and you collect the rent and you pay the mortgage and you pay the expenses, if you managed it really well, you have good debt, because at the end of the month you have a positive cash flow. And
Right.
that positive cash flow then goes into your pocket. That's really good debt.
I remember I was talking to my rich dad when I was a lot younger. He just laughed. He says, "So you're losing $100 a month?" I said, "Yeah." "How many of those can you afford?" I said, "One." And he says, "What would happen if you were making $100 a month from every property? How many could you afford?" I did the math really quickly, as much as I could find. And that's the difference in mindset. Is that correct, Kenny?
Yeah, I think if you're better off just having your money in the bank if you're going to buy properties that are negative.
They're losing money every
Yeah,
month.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense, because basically what they're saying is, without saying it, the property's going to be worth more in the future.
Yeah.
They're betting on that.
They're betting on
Yeah.
that, which is, again...
And 2008 proved that wrong.
Yeah, it did, and it will again, and it's done it year over year, and I think that you better, it's like a stock. How do you know a stock's going to be higher tomorrow or not?
Right. And so when we buy a property, we would like it to appreciate over time, but it's not a driving factor of whether we're going to buy the property or not.
You should never buy based on that. It's completely and solely.
It's called appreciation. We don't buy on appreciation.
Yeah, think about the opposite of that. Think about a negative cash flowing property and the property goes down in value.
Well,
You're screwed.
Yeah, look around and you see some of these big stores that are sitting empty. Somebody's paying for that out of their pocket now.
For sure. Somebody built them. Somebody has debt on those, right?
Thank God they're probably a private equity company or a bank.
Well, or somebody's pension fund.
Pension fund. So, Kenny, I mean, personal question. How much, in 2008, we were laughing about the market going down because we love crashes. Kim and I love, and you love crashes. How much did you borrow between 2008 and today?
Probably between $500 and $600 million.
$500 million.
Yeah.
And is it all making us money?
Yes.
Lots of money?
Lots of money. Lots of cash flow.
And are we paying tax on that?
Not on all of it. Most of it we're not, but on some we are.
Why is it we don't pay tax on that?
Well, because we get depreciation on the real estate that we actually
That's the
own.
word.
Yeah.
It's called depreciation, and the average investor out there is counting on appreciation.
Yeah. We get cash flow, and in most cases we don't pay. We don't pay tax.
And what exactly? Explain depreciation for those who don't know.
So the way the government works is that if you buy a property, they say it depreciates over a certain period of time. So
that we rent out.
Yeah, commercial property is 30 years. Apartments are 27 and a half years. Don't ask me why, but they are. So if you buy a $30 million property, the simple math on a commercial building, the simple math is you get $1 million of depreciation a year.
So you write that off against your taxes.
Well, if there's $500,000 or $600,000 in cash flow, and you have $1 million of depreciation, you actually show a loss. And you actually get to use those losses other places.
And the government allows people like Kim and I not to pay tax on those losses.
Yeah, so depreciation is an expense that can come right off of the cash flow.
And this is the big difference between, especially my friends in Australia. I love you guys dearly, but you guys have been the lucky country for years, and you've been counting on negative gearing. In other words, you count on losing money because you can hope for appreciation, and the professionals are actually hoping for depreciation. That's the biggest difference, and that's what financial education should educate you on. So once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. You can listen to our program on your time and any schedule. We're on iTunes and Android. All of our programs are archived at richdadradio.com. And we're talking about the difference between professional real estate investors and amateurs. And who do you listen to? Do you listen to Susie Orman, who says, cut up your credit cards? Dave Ramsey, who's a friend of ours, a great guy. He says, live debt-free. And then the Rich Dad Company talk about how we use debt to get rich. Comments, Kim?
So you were saying, Robert, about, when I started out and the goal was to get 20 properties in 10 years. And
20 greenhouses.
20 greenhouses, and we did that in 18 months. And then we kept buying, and I was overseeing the management. And so we had a bunch of properties, and we had apartment buildings, but they were pretty much, 30, 40 units, buildings.
C minuses.
Yeah. But I was not investing anymore because I couldn't manage anymore. I had reached my limit of how many I could manage, and that's when we met you, Kenny.
Kim went from small investor to big deal investor with Kenny. So your teachers, not only does experience count, but who your teachers are counts. So Kenny steps in and he goes, what do you say about your
Kenny
deals?
asked me, I said, oh, thank goodness somebody, number one, we were all very aligned on our philosophy of real estate and cash flow. And so I'm like, oh, finally, somebody can manage my properties, because at that time you just had the property management company. I was like, Kenny, would you take over my properties? And Kenny said, no, you're too small. We only manage properties of 100 units or more. And I'm like, oh no. But then the little light bulb goes on and we're like, so we need 100 unit buildings and turn them over to Kenny, and that's what we did. So by meeting you,
and we use more debt to buy those 100 unit deals.
But that also ramped us up to a bigger game,
right,
and bigger deals.
So Kenny just politely said, "I'm sorry, Kim and Robert, you're real estate investors, but you think too small." And that was a kick in the and it hurt for a while, but I realized a better teacher had come along. And Kenny, aren't you proud of Kim? I mean, she's...
Oh, yeah. It's been wonderful to watch. I mean, especially now you guys are doing big deals on other stuff, and it's a lot more fun. We get back to that property management issue that you were talking about, Kim, because I have friends that manage single-family houses, and there's only so many you can manage because you're driving all over the city for one tenant. We
also meet people who've never invested before, and they go for the big deal. But we always say, you start small.
Yeah.
Start with
I really
start
believe
with
you
a small
need to.
single family house. Or
the three of us have a really good friend. He listened to my first talk about Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and buying real estate. And he's all action, no brains. He's a great friend. He went off and bought the big red hotel in Perth, Australia, and went bust.
That was his first deal.
His first deal.
Construction, all of it.
And then the other one, his name is Richard. We love him all our heart, but that guy is all action and no brains. The next thing he comes and says, okay, I've been listening to you guys. Like, I went bust over here in Perth, Australia. I'm going to come to the States. So he shows Kim and I his new property, and Kim says, there's something wrong.
No, he said it was in New Mexico.
Yeah,
he says, it's in New Mexico. And I'm like, oh, let me see, Richard, let me see. And I'm looking at it, and we go, Richard, that's not New Mexico. That's Mexico.
That's south of the border. I'm like, Richard.
He says, but it was cheap. I said, well, that's a reason it was cheap.
It's just a little bit of difference. What a difference a word new means.
So we talk about, we learn from our mistakes, but, just remember 4 greenhouses, 1 red hotel.
Start small.
In your neighborhood, not Mexico. Okay,
Yes.
Nothing wrong with Mexico, but that's a long way from Singapore. So coming up, we have another person talking about Trump, how he's going to save the Rust Belt, namely Detroit. As you know, Detroit defaulted on its competent. Definitely cut up your credit card, but I don't know how you can rent a car or check into a hotel or order from Amazon if you don't have a credit card. And the other person is a friend of ours, Dave Ramsey, and his mantra is live debt-free. And that's really good for most of the poor and middle class. because they have no financial education in school. As I always ask people, what does school teach you about money? And since they taught you just about nothing, it's best you live debt-free. Kim and I met this guy, he's a friend of ours, and he says, I listened to Dave Ramsey. I had a rental property, and Dave said to live debt-free, so I sold the rental property and paid off my house. And I went, that's not what we would do, but for you, probably a good idea. So what financial advice you listen to depends upon your level of financial education. That's what we're saying here. So you can listen to the Rich Dad program on your time, your schedule, anywhere on iTunes or Android, and all of our programs are archived at richdadradio.com because we're an education program. We don't sell anything. And we believe that you want to listen to this program again and again, especially if you believe debt is bad. For those of you who actually think getting out of debt is smart, go to Rich Dad Radio, listen to this program again 95,000 times until you erase it from your brain, and then you can hear how debt makes the rich richer. Or as Donald Trump says, I am the king of debt, but debt is dangerous. Or as was the founder of McDonald's, what was his name?
Ray Kroc.
Ray Kroc. Ray Kroc asked the MBA class at University of Texas, says, what business is McDonald's in? Everybody laughed. Yeah, Ray, we all know you're in hamburgers. And Ray Kroc says, no. McDonald's is a real estate company. And so is the Rich Dad company, a real estate company. And there's reasons for that. And so one of the reasons is because we love debt and we hate paying taxes. So really, that's the difference is who you listen to depends upon your commitment to your personal financial education. If you have no financial education, then buy stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, and debt-free muni bonds. That's best for you. Our guests today are Ken McElroy.
Yes, Ken McElroy is our Rich Dad advisor on real estate, and he's the author of The ABCs of Real Estate Investing. Highly recommend it. The ABCs of Property Management. I highly recommend it. And The Advanced Guide to Real Estate Investing.
Which is how Ken uses debt to finance out and pay no tax. So if you really want to know how Ken does it, those 3 books are must-reads.
And our guest now is Pete Saunders, and he is a writer for Forbes and Chicago Tribune. He's an urban planner and consultant, and he specializes in economic and social trends and demographics. And we're talking a lot about the Rust Belt because Trump says we're going to save jobs in the Rust Belt for all these people that have lost their jobs. So Pete is an expert in that area, and welcome to the show, Pete.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here.
So let me ask you this question, Pete. We've had a lot of friends who ran into Detroit when it collapsed, and they said it was a time to buy. But buying something just because it's cheap doesn't really make sense to at least the 3 of us in the sound booth right now. So what is going on in Detroit? Can Trump bring it back?
Well, I think Trump possibly could bring it back. I think time is just right now for a city like Detroit to be able to come back. It's really had its challenges over the last, half century, as we all know. But I think that in the aftermath of the municipal bankruptcy that happened in 2013, 2014, which came on the heels of the Great Recession, I think that it has been rebounding, and it has shown that what's happening is enduring. So I think that, yes, it is cheap. You'll find tons of cheap properties there. But now there's a strong sense that what's happening, the appreciation is going up and it's enduring. And I think that's proven by 2 rich dads, if you want to call them that, who have taken a lot of interest in buying up properties in the downtown and midtown areas in Detroit. Dan Gilbert, the owner of Rocket Mortgage, Detroit native. Mike Illich, who recently passed, who was the founder and owner of Little Caesars Pizza, and owner of the Detroit Red Wings. Between the 2 of them, they've been very active in buying up properties throughout downtown and midtown Detroit along the riverfront, holding on to those properties, selling them, and making money. I've heard you talking a lot about debt early on, and people were saying when they made those early investments, why are you doing this? And now it's paid off for both people, for both of those gentlemen. And I think we're finding that it's paying off for the city as well.
Right. And, the basic of economics is supply and demand. And one of the ways I thought was pretty smart about Detroit, the way they increased demand was take out supply. And so didn't they bulldoze whole city blocks down, taking out the houses?
Well, that's true. There were a lot of very low demand buildings, residential, commercial, industrial, whatever. And the city did take a lot of those out. And what you will find are some areas that are frankly pretty devoid of any structures. Now, I have to caution that new development hasn't really started there, but I do believe that the opportunity is there, to move away from the downtown and the riverfront, and then almost have a greenfield type development example to be able to move forward in other parts of the city.
So Pete, you talk about the Rust Belt, and the Rust Belt being Detroit, Chicago, Cleveland, Milwaukee, and your expert is in demographics. So in order for housing to work, there's got to be jobs. What are the demographics happening? Are jobs coming back to these cities?
Jobs are coming back to many of those cities, and they are not necessarily all manufacturing jobs. And that's the one thing I would caution, is that there are a lot of people who are saying, well, the new administration is going to bring back the manufacturing jobs that really these cities were built on. I caution that. I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen, and I also don't think that that's what the major Rust Belt cities have been using as job creators. You look at the examples of cities like maybe Pittsburgh, which has used its connections with Carnegie Mellon University and the engineers that are housed there to develop a really strong robotics program, and has really made strong connections with Silicon Valley to be able to bring jobs back to the old Steel City. Cleveland has really based its growth on the Cleveland Clinic, biomedical healthcare, and has really tried to use that as a thrust to move it forward.
So
plus LeBron James,
and
the Cavaliers.
And so a lot of the job creation is coming from the technology arena.
It is technology, but I would also say that it's technology that's related to the manufacturing heritage and legacy that many of these cities have. Chicago, great example. I think one of Chicago's strengths is its transportation and logistics, which is, as manufacturing as anything. But they've turned that around to using technology to be able to push it forward and to be a job creator in this region. I live in the Chicago area. Meanwhile, Detroit has been pairing, the big three have been pairing with technology to move into the automated vehicle sector, driverless cars, the development of electric batteries, and at the Detroit Auto Show, or I should call it the North American International Auto Show, they really made a big push to show the partnership between Silicon Valley and Detroit to show how they're working on it.
Once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. And our special subject today is whose financial advice do you listen to? Do you listen to Susie Orman, says cut up your credit cards, Dave Ramsey, live debt free, or the Rich Dad Company says use debt. Our guest we're listening to right now is Pete Saunders. He's a writer, urban planner, and consultant specializing in economic and social trends. So let me ask you this question. When you talk about jobs coming back and all this, are you optimistic, or can Trump do anything, or is it just purely on the spirit of entrepreneurs to rebuild the devastation?
Well, I do think that there's some jobs that can be recaptured. I think as we change our trade policies, as we change, as we adopt a more protectionist position, I think that there will be some more jobs. I don't think that it will be like it used to be for two reasons. I think, one, we cannot discount automation and the impact that it's had. I frequently work with communities and with businesses that have large-scale manufacturing complexes with minimal number of people. And that's just the trend that we have, and that's the trend that we're going with, that we're headed to right now.
So
so that's going to be
one of the reasons my friend, and Ken is going to talk about his friend Eric, who's in Detroit. One of the areas I look at that's a shortage coming up is this thing called fresh water. And Detroit and the Rust Belt area are surrounded by water. So in my opinion, one of the greatest assets that the Detroit area has, Chicago and those areas, is water. That to me is one of the biggest optimistic points of that area. Unfortunately, they're filled with carp, but at least there's fresh water up there. So, Kenny, what did Eric say about Detroit? Because he's buying properties up there, right?
Yeah. He owns a company there called Village Green, and he works with us in Scottsdale, Arizona as well, but he commutes back and forth. I'd like to ask you, Pete, because one of the things that Eric was telling me is that, slow job growth has been a challenge for the apartments that he bought. So are you seeing job growth in Detroit?
Job growth is slow. It's happening, but it is slow. I think that on the more educated side, there has been accelerated job growth for people who are educated, knowledge workers, quote unquote creative class. There has been a lot of that, but I think one of the downsides of a long-term manufacturing place has been sort of a de-emphasis on education as we headed into an economy that's much more reliant on educated talent. And one of the facts is that there are fewer people with bachelor's and master's and doctorate degrees in Detroit than maybe in some other areas, and that's true for much of the Rust Belt.
Right. There was a great book came out by a Yale graduate called Hillbilly something. What was the name of that book?
Hillbilly Elegy.
Yeah, that was a great book because he talked about how they moved as hillbillies out of the hillbilly mountains of West Virginia, that area, and they moved into Ohio and Indiana. And they said even though they had no education, a couple could get 2 jobs paying $75K each. So they were making $150,000 a year with no education.
Right.
And so what you're saying now is when those jobs disappear, those hillbillies or the uneducated.
They go back to the hills.
Yeah. So anyway, Pete, I want to thank you for your contribution. And I'm very optimistic about Detroit. Number one, for water, but I read this one article where this entrepreneurs bought those old factories and they turned them into fish tanks. They pump them full of water and they're raising fish in there and all this algae and all this stuff they're exporting. So I almost flew to Detroit to look at the big fish tanks inside the old factories. But anyway.
Which kind of goes back.
I'm the king of debt. And the point here is this. If you're very poor, you should cut up your credit cards. If you're middle class and financially unsophisticated, uneducated, and basically lazy, not willing to invest in your education, then live debt-free, invest in stocks, bonds, IRAs, mutual funds, and ETFs. For the financially unsophisticated, that's the best thing you can do. Live debt-free and invest in passive assets. But if you really want to be rich, then you might want to listen to guys like Donald Trump or the three of us on this program today because we love debt and we don't pay tax legally. So it does require financial education. So before I want to say thank you to Pete Saunders. He's a writer, urban planner, and consultant. He was talking about Detroit. And once again, you can listen to the Rich Dad Radio program on your time and your schedule with iTunes or Android. And all of our podcasts are archived at richdadradio.com. And if you're one of those people who believes in appreciation, who likes living debt-free and thinks credit cards are nasty, and you want to know how to get rich, then you should go to richdadradio.com and find out how this program will tell you how debt makes people like Ken, Kim, and myself richer, and we pay no tax. That's the biggest difference of all. Any comments, Kim?
No, this was a really interesting show, and again, we're talking about people being active investors, not passive investors, not blindly turning your money over to somebody else to manage, but to be actively getting educated. And part of getting educated is putting it into practice. You got to get in the game at some point. So you can study all you want, but you really have to put your money down at some point, and that's where a lot of the experience and knowledge will come from. So part of being an active investor, you got to, number one, know the difference between good debt and bad debt.
Kenny, any comments?
Yeah, growing up, my parents didn't have all these financial products to put money into. They didn't have mutual funds and 401ks and things like that. And there were bank failures, of course, and there was the stock market, which was for the rich. So they had to understand, and they had to study, and they had to understand things like this that we're talking about. And I think that that's the problem that we've had in the last 50 years is that they've created these financial products. It's made people really lazy, and they don't have to. It's easy to turn your money over to somebody, and without really knowing where it's going.
Right. Yes, and Ken McElroy is our Rich Dad advisor on real estate. He's the founder of MC Companies. He's been our investment partner for 15 plus years, and he's the author of The ABCs of Real Estate Investing, The ABCs of Property Management, and The Advanced Guide to Real Estate Investing. I highly recommend all of them.
And Kenny donates their proceeds to charities, right?
Yes, of course. Yep. All the book proceeds and speaking go to charity.
Yep. There's one more thing is that the more you know, the better decisions you make. Because our friends in Australia, they really crack me up because they're like, Australia is the number one city now, or number one country that people are running to, more than the U.S. And so their property prices are good and all this. But my friends in Australia, Sydney and Melbourne and Perth and all that, they always talk about negative gearing. So the real estate agents tell them to buy a property to lose money because the property will appreciate. And it does work as long as Australia has people moving into the net migration in. But the question I always say is, if you're losing $100 a property, how many properties can you afford? Well, not much. But if you're making $100 a property, how many properties can you afford? As many as you can get a hold of. So that's why for those of you without much financial education and you're listening to these real estate agents, not that they're bad people, but most of them are not investors. They're salespeople, same as financial planners and stockbrokers. So that's why you listen to the Rich Dad Radio Show. You can submit your questions. Listen to the Rich Dad Radio Show, and you can submit your questions to Ask Robert at richdadradio.com. And here's the first question, Melissa.
Our first question today comes from Gary in Castroville, Texas. Favorite book, Cashflow Quadrant. It says, when the economy crashes and renters cannot pay their rent, how will investors be able to make the monthly mortgage payments? Will special concessions be made to investors by mortgage note buyers?
I don't know that question. Kenny might, but I will say this much. If you're small, you probably get wiped out if the little guy leaves the place and you can't get another tenant in there. But Kenny, that's the reason you have a team. What's your concern about that?
Yeah, well, the most recent, it's not exactly that question, but the most recent thing we just saw in 2007 and 2008 was all these people losing their jobs. That's probably, that's real time. And what we saw was the resiliency of these tenants. They loaded up, they moved back with their parents, they doubled up with roommates, and a lot of the houses went back to the bank, I think almost 10 million homes. So we kind of went through it a little bit, but the last thing before a rental is the street. So there will be concessions probably from the government to pay for people's rent, just like welfare or food stamps or anything like that. They're not going to let people
live on the street,
live out on the street.
It's called in America. It's called Section 8. If you can't afford a house, the government will give you money to live in an apartment.
So, Kenny, let me ask you this, because you want to have your rental properties where there are jobs. So from your experience, where are the jobs moving to today?
That's actually the greatest question. And so it's pretty simple to watch. The millennials, the reason they're not buying homes right now is because they're sitting back trying to see where the jobs are, and they're incredibly mobile.
Plus they have student loan debt, a lot of them. Yeah,
the jobs are being created in the cities that have governments that are pro-jobs, actually. Like Phoenix.
And Washington, D.C. is the highest growth rate because
government.
Corruption.
Yeah, government jobs. So that's why Trump, like him or not, his whole thing is about bringing back jobs. So wherever that happens is going to be where you want to have rentals, in my opinion.
Thank you. So next question, Melissa.
Our next question comes from Dennis in Newark, New Jersey. Favorite book, Unfair Advantage. He asked, should I invest in my first property now or wait to see what happens in the Trump presidency?
The first thing I would say is take a real estate course, investment course, or start with Kenny's books, because Kenny and Kim and I have had so many people. For example, Kim and I had a partner who says, yeah, I'm a real estate expert. I've bought 6 houses. and the 6 houses were houses she and her family lived in. That's consumer debt, a mortgage. She has no idea what it's like to run a rental business. So one of the pitfalls I see with the average real estate investor, they think just because they bought a house makes them Donald Trump. Any comments on that, Kenny?
Well, it's a good question. I think, I call this analysis paralysis, I mean, everybody, they want to know everything that's going to happen tomorrow.
Make sure everything's perfect before they buy.
It just won't happen. I actually don't think Trump's going to disrupt the real estate market much. I mean, if you look at his father, Fred Trump, started in, that's the whole Trump family started with real estate and made their money on real estate. And also, it's needed. We need housing. We need it. We do. And we haven't had homes built in the last 10 years, really. And so we're in a housing crunch right now, believe it or not. That's why houses are going up. And it's because, population's growing and the supply of housing is not. So I think that you're going to see a lot happening. But I don't think you should time anything. It's a long-term investment.
And I look at it because they want everything to be perfect before they get in there.
Yeah.
When you and I were started investing, interest rates were at like 12 and 15%. Right. And now they're at 3% for loans. So
one last thing, Kenny, do you flip property?
No, we hold everything.
See, there's a whole difference in philosophy. These TV shows, Flip and Flop, and who all these guys are. They don't know what they're doing. They're flipping for capital gains, which is highly taxed. And Kim and I invest for cash flow or passive income, which is zero tax. So that's why I reckon we have Rich Dad's Education and Rich Dad's Coaching. And I would invest first in your education. The one big problem with real estate, if you're buying it to flip it and it doesn't flip, real estate is not liquid. You can't get out. You ride that sucker down like the Hindenburg dirigible going down. So stocks and paper assets are good because they're liquid. You can make a mistake. You can get out fast, but you can't get out of real estate. So that's why you hear me saying take classes. I started taking classes back in 1973, and I don't stop. That's the difference. Real estate is not liquid. The same as starting a business is non-liquid. But stocks are liquid. That's a very big difference. Final words, Kenny, do you ever sell property?
No, I think while I believe it's a good question, I think you need to look bigger than Trump. And the issue is we have 5